Cycle syncing is actually the missing piece to a lot of our burnout issues. When we ignore the cycles of the body, we actually are causing a lot of imbalances, both in our energy field and in our cells, in our hormones, in our blood sugar, like on a physical level. But for a lot of us, we've spent our entire lives disconnected from or even actively resentful of our periods. Hey Mama, welcome back to the Thrive Mama podcast. I'm Martina, certified nutrition consultant and holistic health coach, and a mama of two, and I'm so glad you're here. I'm here to help busy moms unlock their energy, balance their hormones, and break out of burnout using nutrition as a foundation. On this podcast, we will dive into actionable strategies on nutrition, nervous system healing, and aligning with our cycles, with a healthy dose of relatable motherhood thrown in. All designed to help you move past surviving to actually thrive in motherhood. Let's do this. All right, Mama, I'm so excited to dive into today's episode with you. Before we jump in, a couple of quick announcements for us. If you enjoy today's episode all about our cycles and syncing up our life with our cycles, you are going to love this new mini podcast series that my dear friend Kayla and I have put together. This audio journey is called Cycle Codes, and it is a short mini series all about connecting to the cycles of our life, both in our bodies and in the universe at large. This audio series really invites ceremony, ritual, and a lot of curiosity into every part of our lives. It's a really casual and interactive conversation where you can explore some of these deeper elements of cycle syncing. And we get to really dive deep into the cycles of our bodies, the cycles of the moon, the seasons, and other astrological transits, while also weaving in a lot of ritual, embodied presence through meditation and sound healing, and of course, the magic of holistic nutrition, all in this mini audio series. So Cycle Codes is kind of like the after dark, deeper part 2 of today's episode. So if you enjoyed this episode, I know you're going to love it. I'm going to leave a link below this episode with all the details to check out the Cycle Codes mini podcast series. If you enjoyed today's episode, I know you're going to love those. And with that, let's jump into today. Let's jump into this one together. I'm so honored and excited to connect with you. I've got my juice here. Today is pineapple, cucumber, celery, tons of ginger, carrots. Kind of my go-to blend, but it is giving me life today. The other thing giving me life today, the sun. It is late February as I'm recording this, but it is like 66 degrees and sunny outside, and it feels like frickin' beach weather. It's incredible. So we've been having all the windows and doors open all day. The fresh air is just so life-giving. And there's nothing like this season of just the reemergence of warmth and light to really highlight some of the themes of this conversation we're talking about, which is we are cyclical beings. And winter has its own kind of medicine, for sure. Winter is an incredibly important part of both the Earth's cycles and of our individual cycles. And what so often happens is we don't honor the medicine of winter quite enough. We try to push or force, or we end up really depleted and disconnected. And we really feel that. And if you can look around, you can see all of the seasonal depression and increased illnesses. It's so real. And when the reemergence of the sun and the light comes back into our life here in late winter and early spring, it brings such renewed energy and hope and lightness into our lives. And it really does highlight the power of cycles. They are so powerful. But today, I really want to focus on the cycle within our body more than anything else, the menstrual cycle itself. And whether or not you are currently having a menstrual cycle, there is going to be a lot in this episode for you. Because as I'm going to talk about, the menstrual cycle actually just mirrors the greater cycles of the universe. We are all connected. So if you are currently pregnant or breastfeeding, if you're on hormonal birth control for whatever reason, you're not having a menstrual cycle, I really still want you to come into this conversation with an open mind and see what connections are still really relevant in your current season of life. And it's really funny because usually when I sit down to record, I have a broad outline of the topics we're going to talk through and in what order. And today, I don't. Today, I just really felt strongly that I wanted to have this conversation with you. And I just sat down and pushed record. So we're going to flow through. We're going to let it take us wherever we want to go. And no matter what, it's going to be really juicy and really powerful because this topic always is. You're going to tell I get real passionate about some of these aspects of cycle wisdom. And you'll feel that as we move through. And, today's conversation is not going to be like cycle syncing 101 in depth with all of your phases and your hormones. I would love to do a different podcast episode that breaks down the phases of your cycle. Today, I really want to keep it more in the roots of what do we mean when we talk about cycle syncing and why should we care about it? How is it impacting our energy and our burnout? And where does self-care and nutrition weave into all of this cycle work? That's what we're really going to be teasing apart today. So let's start with what exactly it is. When I talk about cycle syncing, what I'm really talking about is an awareness of and an intentional honoring of the internal cycles in our body. So as we move through our menstrual phase, we have different energy, different focuses and strengths at each phase of our cycle. And the way that most of us move through the world is we kind of expect consistency every day. And if we're not being consistent every day, we assume that it is a personal fault. Like there's something wrong with us, that we can't be consistent in our output, in our energy, in our motivation, whatever it is. But what I really invite us into with the cycle syncing conversation is that we are by nature cyclical beings. If you identify as a woman or with feminine energy, if you have a uterus or used to have a uterus, you are a cyclical being. You are not designed to show up the same way every day. And cycle syncing really just means building into your life an awareness of what's going on in your cycles and then honoring it, actually creating space for the individual energy and strengths of each phase of your cycle in your day-to-day life, in the way you work, in the way you sleep, in the way you eat, in the way you interact and plan. It's really kind of revolutionary when you really get down into what it means to honor the body over the external expectations of our society at large. It is not the norm, and it unlocks so much personal power and understanding. And I am going to focus a lot of our conversation today on the menstrual cycle itself, on our internal cycle. But there are cycles all around us, and our internal cycle actually just mirrors the cycles of our universe. It mirrors the lunar cycle very closely, and it mirrors the seasonal shifts of the earth. So our bodies have an inner winter and an inner spring, inner summer, and inner fall every single month. And our bodies have a full moon every month internally. Our bodies have a new moon internally. If we map out our menstrual cycle with the moon's cycles, you will see an exact mirror. It's incredible. They're almost the exact same length, number of days. Each phase is almost the exact same length as each other. And the energy pattern is exactly the same in the lunar cycles and in our internal cycles. So as I'm talking through all this cycle work today, I really invite you to make your own connections of where our menstrual cycle can connect to the cycles at large, because our inner summer may feel different when we're in literal summer on Earth versus the middle of winter. Our inner summer is going to feel different, and we can layer these cycles on top of each other. And that's also where we get to utilize these tools, even if we're not bleeding right now. If we have gone through menopause or we're on birth control or we're pregnant, you get to tap into the external cycles for the same sort of wisdom and support. So I always recommend, if for whatever reason, if your cycles are either really irregular or not happening right now, I always recommend you start by applying what we're talking about today with the moon. start building an awareness around where the moon is in its 29-day cycle, and build in that wisdom and awareness into your life. Start honoring that energy the same way you would the womb energy of our menstrual cycle. And even though it's not coming from inside your body, we are all also connected. And if you want to get really concrete about it for a minute, for my literal thinkers out there, the moon is, we know that the gravitational force of the moon impacts water on Earth, right? It impacts the tides, of course, the oceans. And our human bodies are like 80 to 90% water. So it makes a lot of sense that the pull of the moon also impacts us on a cellular level. So this isn't just like witchy abstract energy, although that's definitely at play too. This is also physiology, how the moon is impacting our bodies. And if you're still skeptical about that, all you need to do is ask a teacher or a nurse or anyone who works in a hospital, anyone in birth work. They will tell you there is a significant behavioral change around full moons, around new moons, because of the way it changes our physiology. So I'm going to go deeper into the cycle syncing piece from a menstrual lens, but just want to give that invitation to really apply this in whatever aspect feels the most relevant to you right now and the most accessible. You don't have to understand all of it all at once. Even just little steps of awareness are making a huge, huge difference. So, my personal argument, thesis, in this conversation is that cycle syncing is actually the missing piece to a lot of our burnout issues. Because when we ignore the cycles of the body, when we try to push into consistency every single day, we actually are causing a lot of imbalances, both in our energy field and in our cells, in our hormones, in our blood sugar, like on a physical level. And these imbalances are causing this energy depletion that never quite gets restored because we never are actually in sync with what our body, is asking for. Most of us have gone through our entire lives becoming desensitized to the signals of the body. We've just learned how to tune it out and stop listening to what the body's trying to tell us, unless the body's screaming. Usually the body has to scream in order to get our attention. But the little things that our body is signaling to us, we tend to push down and ignore, whether on purpose or just by nature of what our society is focused on and prioritizes. And, that pattern really does spill over into how we treat our menstrual cycle. We don't tend to give it much thought of if and when we should be doing certain things. And because we're so disconnected from it, we end up in this energy overdraft, like we have not left in our account because we spent it all in seasons of our cycle that were actually misaligned. I like to use the analogy of flying a kite. So if you really want to fly a kite, you could go outside on the day you scheduled and the day you chose and stand there with your kite and try for hours to get that kite in the sky. But if it is not windy, that is going to be exhausting and frustrating. It's going to take a lot longer, and you probably will end up not getting the result you want anyway. On the other hand, if you hold the intention of, I want to fly a kite, and then you wait for the aligned day, you wait for things to line up, the weather is right, and it is windy and sunny, and you go outside with your kite, you're going to get the same result with much less energy, much less time, and much less frustration. The same is true for how our bodies work. If we push through certain activities, certain patterns and routines in seasons that are misaligned, okay, that really is like trying to fly a kite on a still day. We might be able to get somewhere, but it's going to be pushing against the grain. It's going to take a lot more energy and time and frustration because we're not working with our natural flow and our natural alignment. And if we wait to do those tasks until the elements line up, until we're at the point in our cycle where it makes sense, we can complete the same thing with so much less energy expenditure. So if we go through 30, 40, 50 years of our life trying to fly our dang kites every day, no matter what, we're going to end up exhausted. We're going to end up depleted, and we're going to be angry at our bodies for not like doing what we needed to do, right? And that really is what it's like to move through life disconnected from our cycles. So that is really what it comes down to when I talk about cycle syncing as a way to prevent burnout. That is what I mean. It is all about the wise, intentional use of our energy reserves so that we can move through the things that are important to us, but in aligned timing and in alignment with our body itself. And this can take some practice and it can take some patience, right? Our society is very focused on immediate results, immediate gratification. And so a lot of what we're going to talk about may feel inconvenient. It may feel a little bit like radical or impossible or uncomfortable because it challenges a lot of the values that we were raised with around productivity, around consistency, and really offers a reclaiming of a different way of operating that actually is more authentic to how we were biologically designed to move through our lives. So, if cycle syncing is so powerful, why aren't we all doing it? there's some big things standing in our way here. For one thing, we have to go through enough deconditioning to even be open to connecting with our menstrual cycle in a positive way. For many of us, we were not raised with a reverence for and a respect for our menstrual cycle. We got a lot of our messaging from pop culture and from our peer groups. If we got education from our parents, it was often either negatively focused, welcome to the club, this is a pain, or it was really minimal and practical, but didn't actually get into the depth of what's going on in our bodies because they were likely never taught, right? They passed on everything they were able to. But this chain of wisdom from our elders has really been lost over the generations for many of us. And so we get into our teenage and young adult years, and we, at best, feel indifferent about our cycles. And at worst, we feel really resentful about them because they're messy, they're painful, they're embarrassing, they're gross. We all have those moments of like trying to hide a tampon in our sleeve at school so that no one knows we're on our period, or the utter mortification of like something falling out of your backpack or spotting through your pants and someone knowing you were bleeding. It was something shameful. It was something we all had to hide. And in order to really create the space for cycle syncing to support your life and your energy, we have to come back from that. We have to like make up with our periods. We have to say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't know. And now I want to know. Like, I want to know you. But for a lot of us, we've spent our entire lives disconnected from or even actively resentful of our periods. So deconditioning is a huge one. Just getting over the shame and the embarrassment of a really natural process in our bodies can be a big hurdle for a lot of us. And then I would say a huge piece that is standing in the way of this work is honestly, it comes down to the patriarchy at the end of the day. It comes down to the sort of things our society values and the fact that we, as women or as feminine connected beings, are not designed the same as men. And there are benefits to, like, this isn't better or worse, right? This is like, we need everyone in a healthy society, but there is not enough space and acknowledgement of the natural strengths of our cyclical nature. And instead, our society really emphasizes things like productivity, consistency. Oh my gosh, that's huge. Pushing and producing, right? This like capitalist focus on what can you put out into the world? What can you push through and produce? We are worth what we do. And there's an expectation of consistency every day. Men actually are designed on a 24-hour hormonal cycle. So men, in many ways, are the same every day. The same way our hormones go through these phases every month, they experience something similar in a 24-hour day. And look at how our society is set up. It's set up perfectly for a 24-hour cycle, right? It is not set up perfectly for a month-long cycle. It's designed for the men. And we are different. We are not designed to work that way. So this really is like an act of, it's like activism at the end of the day. It is really radical honoring of the feminine wisdom in a way that's really against the grain of what our society values. You're considered a poor, unreliable employee if one Wednesday you like produce 5 reports and the next Wednesday you produce 1, right? Like now you're unreliable and that impacts the way you're valued in your workplace. That is all patriarchal, capitalist bullshit. It really is. We are not designed to have the same level of focus and output and energy. And we have to build a life that honors that because no one's going to do it for us. The world is not going to do it for us. We have to be willing to do it differently. As one of my mentors, Sarah Jenk, says, we go first. Like we can't wait for someone else to give us permission to do it differently. We go first. That's on us to do, both for ourselves and for the woman next to us that does need support to do it, and for our children and their children. We go first. So by the time you get through the deconditioning, the patriarchy and the capitalism, like that's a lot to wade through. Okay. And at the end of the day, one way that I see people trying to get around that is by sort of packaging cycle syncing into a productivity package for us. Like cycle syncing is valuable because it's like biohacking or it's going to increase your productivity. And I just want to offer an alternative that cycle syncing is valuable because of the wisdom that each cycle holds, not because of what it can produce for us. It's valuable because it's a reclamation of our actual intuitive nature and an honoring of what's already true inside us. It's not valuable because it helps us produce more. Okay. In fact, I think that's sort of being counterproductive when we use cycle syncing as a productivity hack. Maybe you'll get more done more easily, perhaps, but what if you don't? What if you end up not producing more because you have spent 30 freaking years overproducing to try to prove your worth, and now you're reclaiming for yourself that you're worthy no matter what you produce, right? So now you produce less. That doesn't mean cycle syncing didn't work. It means it gifted you this brand new permissioning in your life to honor what's true in your body and to reclaim the wisdom that's already inside of you. So just a quick note on biohacking and productivity, not saying those things don't have a place, but they are not the reason cycle syncing is a valuable conversation to have. So I've been talking a lot about the general energy of our cycle. And this, of course, is a nutrition-focused podcast. So let's weave the food into it, because this is how I actually stumbled into this world, was from a really biological, nutrition-focused lens. I started my career as a fertility coach, and food to support hormonal cycles was a big focus of my work. And I thought it was incredible how we could use food strategically at different points in our cycle to change our hormones and support our hormones. That was so cool to me. And that over the years has spiraled into, wow, it's not just about food. It's also about our schedules and our energy expenditure and our social capital and like all kinds of other things. But food was my gateway in, and it's such an interesting piece and a really nice place to start. If you're like a little intimidated by cycle syncing your calendar, for example, food is a nice place to start, really building awareness and intentionality around what your body's doing and what it might need at that particular phase. Because the reason that our energy shifts throughout our cycle is because our hormones are shifting throughout our cycle. And if we want to get specific about our hormones, hormones are built from the building blocks of our food. Our protein is broken down into amino acids. Amino acids are the building blocks of our cells and of our hormones. Healthy fats are involved in the production of hormones. So the foods that we're eating are totally impacting the hormones being built and how they function. And hormones in return have a huge impact on things like metabolism, digestion, our detox pathways, our moods, of course. Like food plays a huge role in all of those things. So if our hormones are shifting our metabolism at a certain point in our cycle, it makes sense that our food intake would shift as well. And if our hormones are changing our digestion at a certain point in our cycle, it makes sense that our food intake should shift to match that. So food not only supports our hormonal production, but also gets to be responsive to the energy shifts that are happening. And, as I said, I'm not going to get super specific today on like every single phase and what they're asking for, because that would be like a 3-hour long episode. But we will keep exploring that together. And there's lots of places you can start. Our Cycle Codes podcast series is another place to keep deepening into this if you want more strategies and conversation. But for today, even just walking away with an understanding that my food impacts the way my menstrual cycle is moving through my life, that is already huge, and something that a lot of women don't ever get the gift of understanding that. So that sort of broad overview is really where we're going to focus today. But what I will do with us today as we wrap up this episode is to share a little bit about what this looks like for me in practice. This sort of broad energy of reclaiming our wisdom and honoring our cycles. Like, what does this look like for me in my day-to-day life? For one thing, tracking daily is a huge step towards this awareness and intentionality. A lot of us are not aware of what's going on in our bodies, with our energy, with the shifts in our moods and focus. Maybe we record the day we start bleeding in like an app, and that's our tracking system. And that's helpful. That's a great place to start. But it's not, it doesn't encompass the entire cycle, right? There are lots of things going on other than just the bleed. And tracking every day of your cycle by recording somewhere, what day of my cycle is it? What's my energy doing? And what are my general like mood states? Am I overwhelmed? Am I annoyed? Am I feeling really connected to my sexual energy? Am I super motivated? Am I exhausted? Like writing those things down next to the day of your cycle is great. And then throughout a couple of cycles, you'll start to see patterns. Oh, every single month around day 16, this shift happens. This change in my energy happens on this day, and you'll really get to sort of decode what's going on for you already. I promise I'll get back to my my daily tangible things I'm doing. But side note here, a lot of us feel crazy when we're not being consistent, because we're like, well, last week I deep cleaned the whole house and it felt great. And this week I can't even put a dirty dish in the sink. What is wrong with me? We feel insane. We feel like there's something wrong with us. Or, one week we're like really connected to our partner, and the next week we cannot stand to be in the same room as them. Or we plan all these social events for next weekend, and when it comes around, we don't feel like it at all. This sort of inconsistency can make us feel crazy. And so what tracking really offers is a radical understanding, a radical permissioning around what's going on. And it is actually life-changing. I have seen such a shift in people that I talk to. This happens with my friends all the time, and they'll come to me and they'll say like, oh, I hate my boss right now, or like, oh, this is happening, or man, I don't know why I feel like this. And we'll bring it back to their cycle, and they just get this like this sigh of relief that like, it's not a problem. It's not something to fix. It's just the truth of what's happening in your body. And when you track every part of your cycle, you get connection to that sort of decoding process for yourself. because everyone is a little different, right? Like my cycle map is not going to look the exact same as yours. So doing it for yourself as a journey of reconnection and exploration is so powerful. So if you're not already doing that and you want somewhere to start, highly, highly recommend. It's free, it's simple. Just start tracking. You can use a journal, you can use an app, like whatever you want to use, but write it down somewhere. What day of your cycle, and then what are you feeling and experiencing in your body, and have it somewhere that you can compare month to month. Okay, that's huge. That's a big piece of what cycle syncing looks like for me, is just this permissioning and an understanding. Like, of course I feel like this today. Of course I do. It's not a problem. It just is. And it won't be like this forever. That's really life changing. The other way cycle syncing plays out in my routines and rituals is a monthly ritual I do called the Menstrual Map. And you may have heard me share about this before. I've shared about it on Instagram and in my email list. The Menstrual Map is a monthly look ahead of where my cycle for the month ahead is interacting with my calendar. And because I like it, I add on the layer of the moon. So I have these layers of where am I going to be at which phase of the moon, and what's going on in my calendar in that part of the month. So I map out everything I already have planned for the month: trips, big work events, big presentations, days I'm solo parenting, fun outings, like whatever I want to map out. I map it out, look at what days of my cycle are aligning there, and I get a really clear picture of what my energy is going to be doing at that point of the cycle. And I have a whole process where I do this on one sheet of paper, and I keep that sheet of paper like on my desk all month. And it's such an anchor point for my month. And I get to use it to intentionally shift around things on my calendar so they match up energetically to where I know I'm going to be. That way I don't have tons of social events on a week when I know I'm not going to be feeling it. And I don't have tons of house projects planned on a week I know I'm not going to want to do them. I get to be intentional in advance. That's so powerful for me. And I've recorded this whole process into a workshop that you can grab for yourself. It's like $17. It's like 45 minutes walkthrough of how to make your own map. And it's really, really helpful. And I hear from people that they like get to repeat it every month. And it really does impact how they can proactively set up their month to honor the energy of their cycle. So step one, I would say, is track. So you know what your energy is going to be like. And then step two is put that into some kind of practice around your calendar, around your scheduling, so you can proactively be intentional to honor where you're going to be at each part in your cycle. And then the last really concrete way that I play this out in my life is through the food that I'm choosing. And we can go much deeper into this in a future episode where we can break down foods for each phase. That's a super fun conversation. But in general, I now know intuitively what my body's going to need more of at certain phases in my cycle. And so, for example, in the second half of my cycle, in the luteal phase, and then during the bleed itself, I know that my body needs more warming foods, more like cooked warm foods, and more protein rich foods. So I can really emphasize that. In the first half of my cycle, like ovulation, follicular phase, my body really craves more light and energizing foods. So I get to have a lot more smoothies and juices and salads and things like that. And that feels really good. So embodying it through the food, through the energy I'm putting into my body, is a really important practice as well. So my loves, I feel like I could just talk about this all day with you, and this will certainly have future episodes to build upon some more strategies and some more layers of this conversation. But I would love to hear what you think or feel about all of this, what this episode and conversation has brought up for you, where you feel like your focus is around reclaiming your cycles as a guide for your life. I would just love to hear about it. You can leave me comments below this video. You can come send me a DM over on Instagram. And if you want to deepen even further, Cycle Codes is the place to go. Not sure how long this podcast series is going to be up. I think it'll be pretty temporary. So dive in. There's like just a few episodes, and they're not very long, but they're really juicy and really deep and just beautiful conversations building off of a lot of what we have been talking about today. So if you enjoyed this conversation, I know you're going to love that. And I'll leave the link below this video to get access to the Cycle Codes little mini audio journey. So I think I'm going to leave us there today. I really hope that you sit with some of these shifts in perspective and get curious around what the next step is for you. This is not about perfection or pressure to do things like all or nothing. Even just starting by tracking your cycle and building awareness around all of your phases is so powerful. And if you want to deepen it even more, the Menstrual Map workshop is definitely for you. The link will be below this episode so you can read more about that and check it out. All right, loves, I will be back next week with another episode. In the meantime, be sure to share this episode with anyone you think that deserves access to this conversation and this kind of wisdom. You can like this episode and rate the show. If you've been enjoying it, that really helps other people find newer podcasts. And make sure you are subscribed so that you don't miss any future episodes. So my love, I will talk to you again soon. And until next time, take beautiful care of yourself.